terms of mouse pads, I don't think I have a favourite. Right, okay, video's over, thanks. But seriously, I find myself repeatedly throwing different mouse pads onto my desk, with one day saying to myself, my aim scores are really good, I'm hitting all my shots, only for the next day to completely undermine myself with a dreadful performance, so I swap out to another mouse pad, only to go over this over and over and over again. I could never figure out why. And then I realised there are so many factors at play that could determine what about a pad I perform well with at that moment. Humidity, tiredness, my warm-ups, what game I'm playing, they can all contribute to my performance on that day. The obvious exception for things like humidity being glass mouse pads. But I'm not about to spend £100 or $100 on a million different glass mouse pads, with the only discernible difference being a slightly different coloured anime girl on it. So at the moment, I find myself going between 3 different mouse pads. They are SkyPad 3.0. I know I just mentioned about buying a glass mouse pad, but this was a great deal off of Amazon for £25, or the equivalent of $32. This pad is my first and currently only glass mouse pad, and it truly is a different experience. Any other typical mousepad surface, whether it be cloth, felt, leather, all have some common theme amongst them in the way they feel and the way they glide. Glass mouse pads are fundamentally different. If you've looked into them at all, whether you've watched some Boardsy or Optimum Tech, you'll see exactly what I mean. But it doesn't really translate until you feel the sheer lack of static friction as you use them. I really do enjoy the maintenance, or lack of, when it comes to glass mouse pads as well. It's a really nice thought to not have to constantly wash your cloth mouse pads, taking it to the bath, especially with a desk mat, throwing it in the bath, washing it and then slapping it against the wall or hanging it up to dry, waiting 24 hours before then being able to use the goddamn thing again. Compared to a glass mouse pad, you pick up a damp cloth, wipe it down, dry it, and it's essentially just like when you got it. However, I dislike having to wear a sleeve every time I go to use one. If I'm playing more casual games like single player titles or co-op games with a friend, story-based games, I don't want to gear up like I'm about to play 4 hours of Face It. I also think there's something about glass mouse pads I'd love to delve into, and that's aim training. I am partially convinced that utilising a glass mouse pad would enable a superior ability to train your aim and your fine motor controls compared to a cloth mouse pad. But that's a video for another day, week, month, year, unless Voltaic want to get involved. Razer Strider. This pad really surprised me when I got it. I'd been told repeatedly that it's a rough and abrasive surface, and there's definitely some merit to that, but it's not like it equates to 180 grit sandpaper. It's nowhere near that mark. The Razer Strider is great for me when I want a bit of dynamic friction, but not as much as a control pad. However, I don't want to feel like I'm using a sheen polished surface. Speaking of which, going from the SkyPad to the Strider is a night and day difference, especially in terms of the friction and the feel of the skates from the mouse to the pad, which the Strider provides feedback, whereas the SkyPad just feels awful and makes the most horrendous noise. A very large benefit for the Razer Strider is Razer itself. They're a massive company. They are available worldwide very easily, and I imagine they're across every country in Amazon. So if you damage one or it wears down, just hop online, order one, and ships right to your door. I would definitely say that this hybrid pad is a perfectly acceptable pad in all aspects, but it doesn't excel in anything, which I'll be honest is both a positive and a negative for it. It's a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn. I was gifted this mousepad, or desk mat, by my wife for Christmas a couple of years ago. So it's nearly 2 years old, and it's held up the entire time, but it is starting to show its age despite regular cleaning. This is by all definitions a control pad. It is not a mud pad. You could be in an incredibly high humidity environment. You could have not washed this thing in 6 months, and it would still be faster than a Zowie GSR. Of the three, this is the most comfortable pad to use. It's a smooth cloth surface, there is no skin dragging, there is no abrasiveness. It's not as smooth as something like a Lamzu Energon, or an Extrified GP4, but we're really splitting hairs at this point. As stated, mine's a desk mat, but they do a variety of sizes, so there's gonna be something that suits you. However, unlike Razer, the availability is not ideal, and it will entirely depend on where you are in your local retailer as to whether you can get these at a reasonable shipping cost. Because if you live outside the US, shipping from Lethal Gaming Gear themselves is abhorrent, with some shipping prices costing as much as the pad itself. I always feel like I should use speed pads more because my aim always feels much less restricted. But my thought then turns to just move your mouse a bit quicker. It's a 60-gram mouse, like literally the heaviest mouse on my desk at the moment is the Vaxi XES at 61 grams. It's not particularly heavy, just throw the mouse a bit quicker. So I repeatedly find myself going back to the Saturn. It's very much my comfortable old reliable. I've tried and recommended many different mouse pads throughout the years, and I'm sure my favourites are going to change next year and the year after as they've done this year. If you'd have asked me a couple of months ago, my opinions would have been different. I would have said my top 3 mouse pads would probably be the Lethal Gaming Gear Neptune, the Artisan Hayate Otsu, and the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn. But for the time being, I enjoy using these 3. If you want more information about mouse pads as a whole, there are a few specialised channels out there that can really help. Channels like Boardsy or JQ are great sources of information and review. But even they will tell you that the majority of mousepads these days seemingly are just replicas of other mousepads that have come before. I imagine Boardsy has a pile of 30 to 50 pads at home that he's never going to make a review of, because he gets them, receives them, picks them up and immediately thinks this is a replica of something else that I've already reviewed. So if I was to give this video a conclusion, it would probably be this. Stop worrying so much about your peripherals. I truly feel they matter far less than you may think. Instead, focus on your gameplay, your mechanics, your utility usage, your teamwork, your communication. Those will have a much more dramatic impact on your gameplay and your rank than any different mousepad would. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Much love. Goodbye.